Based on the JP schedule, we didn't expect to get Dark Fina for another 2 weeks. So the fact that she's been moved up and that her VC will likely come next week means that there is still some sort of hidden surprise on the horizon, which makes pulling for Dark Fina all the more difficult. So hopefully I can make your decision easier with this should you pull video. Once again, I've decided to split the pros for Dark Fina into several categories, and we're going to go through each of those. We'll also talk about some cons and then also some comparisons to other units so you can decide whether or not you'd like to pull for her. We're going to start by talking about Dark Fina's stats because they're pretty good. They're all around decent stats. The exception would be agility. It's a little bit low compared to a lot of the units that we have now, but there's lots of good stats. So a really high magic stat. We've also got good dex. We've got good luck. It means that she's going to have good accuracy when you pair that with an accuracy passive that gives plus 20 accuracy. And she has a 30% increase hit chance skill, so she should be hitting evasion units pretty easily with the right equipment equipped. She also has a very high innate spirit when you equip her passive. So if you put this passive is plus 24 spirit, so I believe she goes to 26. So when you add that together with some pretty decent resistances, she's going to be pretty tanky against magic damage, specifically like magic scaling damage, and again, as long as you've built her out appropriately with the espers and the equipment that you are, teching against. That's a great segue into our next category, which is survivability, and Dark Fina looks pretty good in that category too. She's got re-raise with 2 casts, and when she has that active, she also has 40% AoE resistance while her HP is above 70%. So if you can keep her out of trouble, then she is going to be able to take one huge hit, like one AoE hit that maybe she's standing too close to the tank, hopefully not, but she'll be able to take that, not die, and then be able to take another hit. So really that's the goal, is taking like 3 hits including re-raise to die, because if she can survive for that long, she's going to kill everything in her path. She also has a great buff that will give light and dark resistance to everybody, plus some spirit, so she can really again get that magic scaling defense up, but also she'll be really good in those light and dark matchups. Next, we need to talk about Dark Fina's damage, and it looks fine. She's got magic resist penetration innately, and she can get a lot from her TMR as well, and then we can use some trust runes and stuff. So we're looking pretty good for her damage capabilities. Her LB has a full dispel, which will definitely make her deal more damage to anyone that has any sort of defensive buffs or resistance buffs, single target AoE, whatever it is. She also has a negative 30% single target resistance imperil on her runic dispel skill, which is also instant cast, which also has the 30% hit chance. So that is your bread and butter skill. She only has 4 casts of it though, and then after that she's using cast time. So it is something that you have to keep in mind for a guild battle, that she doesn't necessarily have as much longevity to fight to, with her best skill only having 4 casts. She also has Comet, which is a element less attack. It can bypass dark resistance, which is really good to see. Dark Fina also has some utility with a multi-hit attack. It's an AoE and it can inflict stop. Now this isn't as cool as the ability that we saw Summer Helena has, which is a big diamond ability that can also inflict stop, but it's still pretty good. It was the coolest thing until we saw Helena. She also has healing and buffing capabilities on her devout sub, but don't expect her to use those on auto unless it's the beginning of a fight or she's completely out of AP. Finally, the other thing I want to talk about is her TMR, which is more applicable to your entire roster, let alone just the Dark Fina that you might be pulling for. It's really good. It's an accessory that has 7 agility, so right there, that's a really important stat, but it also gives you 40% magic resistance penetration and 350 cast time reduction. Now for Dark Fina, this is actually a mandatory buff. She needs that cast time reduction hard, but for other units, you might just use that for the magic resistance penetration, although really this is kind of just helping out any sort of ancient caster that you have that you really like but you can't use because of their cast times. This is a really cool TMR. I think it's going to be let you enable a lot of units, so really a lot of people should be looking out for this, maybe even pulling Dark Fina. You could go to 99 and then slow build from there, and then you have this TMR, or maybe you go all the way because she's a great unit. Now, Dark Fina does have some cons, and I alluded to a few of them, but one of the things you have to keep in mind, especially when you compare her to someone like Black Rose Helena, is that Dark Fina doesn't have these big AoEs, and Helena has a bunch of them on her main job, on her sub job, on her limit burst. With Dark Fina, she has mostly single target attacks, she has a cross-shaped AoE, but she doesn't have any of those big farming AoEs that you see in a lot of other units, except for the Scholar Strike attack. Now, that has a small has a long cast time, and it also, is on a sub job that you'll have to equip. You might want her other sub jobs, I don't know. So it's definitely a little bit harder for her to take on a lot of enemies compared to other casting units. That's not a huge con, but it is something to keep in mind. Now, if you're using the strike attack, that's actually going to hit a lot of people's weaknesses, so that's kind of a pro. The other major thing that I see a problem with is the cast time problem. So she doesn't have any innate cast time reduction. She can use a passive to get 200, and then her TMR gives 350. That's kind of a big deal. Most of her skills on all of her subs, her main, they all have cast times except for her limit burst, of course, and then her single target main skill that she only has those 4 casts of. So once you get through that, to use some of her best skills, she's going to have to cast them, and she'll die while that's happening. Thankfully, she's got some survivability, but this is a red flag. It's something that this leads into my next point, which is that Dark Fina wants to use a lot of buffs. She'd really like to use her TMR every single battle, but she'd also like to cast re-raise, and she'd also like to cast her team buff to give everybody some spirit, some dark and light resist. So it's going to be really difficult for her to realistically use even 2 of those skills on some maps, and that's really going to limit what you see from her. You're going to have to do a lot of on and offing, and that's actually, not even including her Scholar or her Devout sub. So definitely something to keep in mind. If you're not someone, if you're somebody that doesn't like doing all that fine tuning with a unit, then this might not be the unit for you. But for a lot of other people, it's going to be really fun experimenting which maps, you're going to use which buffs, which ones are more important, because you have to, when you see all these good buffs, you want to use them all, but you have to actually decide which one is going to be worth it. Now, the other thing is that her agility is low at 62, and that's not it's a con at the end of the day, because there's a lot of really fast units, and if they can have that extra time to kill her, then that is a problem. Next up are the comparisons, which I'll put up on screen for you now. And we're going to talk about Black Rose Helena first, because they're very similar units in a lot of ways, that they're magic dark damage dealers. At the end of the day, Dark Fina is the single target version of Black Rose Helena. However, she has a lot more survivability than Helena does. Helena is still going to be the undisputed dark magic damage dealer, because she has Dark Imperil on her limit burst. She has these spirit breaks, and she can raise her magic strength pretty high. She's got penetration, etc. I think she's going to be dealing more damage, but that doesn't mean that Fina is dealing like little amounts of damage. She's still a huge damage dealer too, but really the biggest difference between them is that Helena gets a bunch of AoEs, and Fina gets a bunch of single targets and more survivability. When you look at Helena, she also has cast time reduction baked into her buff rotation, which is kind of a huge deal compared to Fina, where you have a lot of choices to make. And it's still noticeable with Helena when she can't get a cast off in time. That's why she doesn't use her 100% hit attack a lot of times against the light cast, because it's too long a cast time. So in fast metas, Dark Fina is going to need to be built for cast time reduction, just like you might need to do something with your Helena if you're not using your instant cast spells. The second comparison is Sadali, which is interesting because they both have devout subs and supportive skills. Sadali has more HP, and his rotation is a lot more clear in terms of buffs of what he wants to do, especially if he's in a win team. So that seems like he's more of a simple unit, but ultimately he has less survivability compared to Dark Fina. He gets more utility, he gets a lot more instant cast spells, but Dark Fina is going to be a lot more survivable, I don't even know if that's a word, compared to Sadali. Now, I wouldn't say that one is better than the other as a unit, but Dark Fina is going to be dishing out more damage than Sadali, just based on all of her natural penetrations, but also her single target imperil. I wanted to quickly mention the Dark Fina VC because it is coming out the week after this one, and it's a pretty good VC. The unit effect, AoE resist 10%, spirit penetration 10%, is a really solid unit effect. The party effect, magic up 50%, dex up 14%, and missile resist 20% is just all around decent to have for any sort of dark squad, and you can put that as a sub VC pretty easily. Now, with dark teams, it's kind of tricky to fit this in because you have the Garvel VC with 20 AoE resist, and then you have the Black Rose Helena. So if you're not running multiple dark magic units, then you'll actually have a very difficult time fitting this in. You'll have to choose whether you're going more defensively or if you're going more offensively. So I think if you're now going to be running, Golbez and Dark Fina, or if you're going to run Dark Fina and Helena, then you will definitely use this VC. But if you actually see yourself using Joker and Leela, but then Dark Fina as a third, then you might not actually have room for this. However, there's going to be a global upgrade, so we have to wait and see what that looks like. I think that most dark accounts that have 2 dark casters will probably just pick this up. I'm definitely going to be considering it, but I'm really unsure if it's something that everybody should pull for just because they got Dark Fina. Now, the missile resistance is kind of interesting if you're looking to tech against missile units with Eliza that just came out and Alaya coming out in the near future. And now it's time to answer the question, should you pull for Dark Fina? And it's a really difficult question to answer because she's a really strong 100 cost unit, and I know we keep getting these strong 100 cost units and she's not limited. So ultimately this is really tough timing for Fina to be coming out. Now that we've seen the Summer Helena reveal in JP, we're likely getting Summer Helena in a few weeks, and who knows what else we might get in terms of summer surprises from Gumi. So, by the way, if you haven't seen Summer Helena yet, she's really good, or she looks really good at least. We haven't seen her in action yet. But I think that Dark Fina will undoubtedly improve dark accounts. She's going to allow you to use your Golbez and Helena by dispelling Celes' Runic. She has all sorts of tools to work in the current meta, and if you're looking for some boost there, then I think she's going to be helpful for you. But if you're doing fine, then there's no need to pull for her. Many dark players, myself included, went the Joker Leela route, and they're just crushing it right now. So you don't necessarily need to add another unit to that. However, the Joker, Dark Fina, and Leela team is going to be a really strong team, but it's not a deal breaker if you don't get it, because you're still in a really good spot, and there's lots of good stuff to save for. So it pains me to say this because I love Dark Fina in FFBE, but it's just safer for people to skip her and wait for the summer units, or for the Final Fantasy 13 units, or for the Final Fantasy Tactics units, or maybe even a global surprise that we get along the way. So if you do decide to pick up Dark Fina, then don't worry, you have a very strong unit on your hands. I'm just not personally recommending her to players at this time. So I will also be skipping her, but I will be keeping an eye out in the future for any chances to grab her. If there's a 100 cost select ticket that comes up with her in it, then I am going to be buying that for sure, because she is my top choice of the units that I don't have yet, and of a lot of the units that are coming out in the future. I'm just trying to save in case some fire units come out soon. That's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and if you made it this far into the video and you're not subscribed to the channel, you haven't liked the video, then honestly, what are you doing? Just come on, think about it, do it. Help me out. It helps support the channel, and I appreciate it very much. So thank you so much, everybody, and we will see you in the next War of the Visions video.